Maybe the finance industry is just dumb. So I'm reading this book from 1974, 1954. Anyway, and they're citing these economists going back to the 1930s about the consumption model. No, sorry, I just burped. Burp! The consumption model assumes that as a household formates, i.e. I get with my wife, we get jiggy with it. We have a child, we buy a house. We buy a house with debt because you can't even back in the old days, you couldn't afford a house with just cash money. Even the houses were a little bit more affordable than they are today. So you take on debt to acquire a house. You have to buy stuff to furnish the house. You got to buy things for your kids, blah, blah, blah. You see what I'm saying? You spend more and more money as your house is formal, as a house formates, have a house formation, and then you add to the house by having children and whatnot. And then common sense is that kids get out of the house. This is usually the time you're making the most money you've ever made. Most time when you don't have as much debt, you're paying off your debt. And as such, your consumption drops relative to your income. Now, you could say, well, I still consume more because I like fancier clothes, I like a fancier car. Some people do, sure, but the vast majority of us don't. We're just like, no, I'm just comfortable. I mean, here's what, 2017 Dodge Durango. It says 8 years old, 130,000 miles on it. There's no reason. It works fine. You know what I'm saying? So, look, I'm in my t-shirt, so I don't care. And I think I'm like most people. At least people watch this video. So anyway, the point being is this is just a good old-fashioned consumption model of life cycle consumption. Inherently makes sense. And then I'm sitting there thinking, so I'm reading this, and I didn't even know this goes back, like I knew about Francis Modigliani or whatever his name is. I learned about him when I was in school in college. I learned about him, and I think he won a Nobel Prize and stuff. And I said, yeah, and that makes sense. But I was like, why does the financial industry not see this? Or do they just, and I started to think, maybe they're just not that bright. Maybe they're just not that bright. I don't know how else to put it, because the issue is, why do they keep perpetuating, or they have for years, about that the life cycle of spending increases each year with inflation from, when you're basically just keeps going up and up. I mean, it's just weird to me, especially when I have economists from the 1930s even talk about, this is before Modigliani or Modigliani. Because I'm not Italian, I can't pronounce Italian names. Francis Modigliani, I think is how you say it. So why? And I just think they're ignorant. Obviously, it's kind of like these economists who are anti-tariff. They're just ignorant of economic history. They just are. And being ignorant doesn't make you dumb. But if you're an economist and you have knowledge of economic history, and then you're going to turn around and cite that tariffs are always and everywhere a bad thing, then you're either dumb or you're lying. One of those two things. It's just not true. We have evidence that that's just simply not the case. It's just not. Now, you can make a case that tariffs didn't do as much as they thought and all that, but you can't sit there and say tariffs are always and everywhere in economic depravity. That's just stupid. And the same thing with financial planning industry, the financial industry as a whole, investment industry. And I've met a lot of investment guys. They aren't the brightest bulbs. They're just not. A lot of these guys are they want to be economists, and they just, maybe you have BAs in business or BA, and I have a BA in economics, because the math stuff, I just didn't like it, man. I'm not bad at math. I'm not that good at it. And I like the theory, the history behind the stuff as much more than I like the econometrics and stuff, because I don't buy most of that anyway. Because economics is how do you deal with scarcity. And you can say all day long, well, my model says this, that, and the other, but at the end of the day, is that what reality has shown? And the answer is no, because human beings are not rational the way economists would say they should be. Human beings don't behave as rational creatures according to the economic model of what we should be doing for scarcity. And the reason for that is because human beings, they have we're rational individually, which makes economics, actually, I find very, very interesting. Psychology, economics, some finance thrown in there, because it is about money too in a lot of ways. But anyway, you put it into a piece of paper and a formula and say, this is the way it's got to be. Well, that's just dumb, because it's just not true. And if you can put that into a formula and say this is the way it's got to be, then we can test that formula against past history. You say, well, your formula didn't work here, there, and there. Then how do you still rely on that formula? Well, because, and that's what economists are doing when it comes to tariffs. It's silly. But it's even worse than that for finance, because finance has been sitting there, the 4% rule, touting the 4% rule for years and years and years. Or touting that you can't retire without $2 million. And I know Susie Orman's not I get that. Susie Orman's not the brightest bulb. Clark Howard here in Atlanta, not a smart guy, dude. Not a smart guy. I mean, this guy's just dumb. I get all that. There's a lot of idiots out there in my business for sure. And then I just started occurring to me, because I'm just reading this, that we've had this knowledge about the consumption theory well beyond many, many years. And no one's actually disproven it. I mean, you can make a case, I suppose, that it doesn't work the exact way the model suggests. I get that. But, and then you can say, well, it doesn't work if there's not a household formation. It's just if you rent, maybe. I just don't. But the evidence shows otherwise. With just BLS data, HRS data, and all the other CAMS data, all this other stuff, the evidence just shows otherwise. So for not just for married households and in terms of household formation, but just even single households with household formation, or as they get older as well, people generally spend more on their front end of their life, because that's where they have to take on debt, and they have to take on debt in order to finance the things they need to buy to build a house, to furnish a house, if even they're renting, to buy a car for commute to work and whatnot, to go to college. And then as that debt starts getting paid off, they don't just magically start replacing that debt payment with consumption. They just don't, and there's no evidence for that. And it just occurred to me that I just don't think the financial industry it has a lot of deep thinkers. I don't. I think there's some. I think Jeremy Grantham, I can't stand him, but he's a deep thinker. I read his thing on, how capitalism could collapse because of the demographic bomb that's happening. I get that. And I had a lot of citation stuff and a lot of interesting tidbits there. Like, for instance, in in 3 generations, there'll be 8 South Korean grandparents for every 1 grandchild, the way it's going right now. That's just crazy, you know what I'm saying? And so that's something that I think a lot of finance people don't recognize, you know what I'm saying? A lot of finance people say, oh man, look at my alpha. I'm generating this alpha, my beta, blah, blah. It's just, at some point, you just got to see these guys just aren't that bright. They're not curious. They're not inquisitive. Basically, they're looking at finance as gambling, essentially. And they love to gamble. They probably all have, freaking sports books, on their apps. They probably all, hell of them probably got some OnlyFans subscriptions, you know what I'm saying? It's just not that bright people. And it's very, very frustrating, because unfortunately, they have a lot of say in what people perceive as their ability to retire. And it's just too bad, because if you knew some of these people like I do, who are in the finance business, I'm not saying they're bad people or evil people even. I'm not even saying they're overly greedy. I'm just saying they're not that bright. They're just not that bright. And as such, I think you got to take it all with a grain of salt. And you can even say it for me. You say, oh, Josh, you're not that bright. That's fine. Challenge me, man. Look, I don't care. You can say it all day long. Just tell me where I'm wrong. Don't just say, oh, you're an idiot. Blah, 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 blah. My son just said the Browns drafted Shedeur Sanders. Oh, no one likes him because he's black. All right, God bless. Love your thoughts.